I actually literally had an AI do that to me. Be careful, catch them in lies. If you ask them enough times to where did you get that from, then finally they'll go, I made it up.
Where are consumers searching for local businesses today?
Despite all the buzz, despite all of the headlines, Google still dominates. TikTok searches, this is just general searches, this isn't even local, was 3%.
All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of Marketing Guides for Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Barthel, and today we're looking into the latest research on how consumers can actually find small businesses in 2025, where people are searching. I think this is important for small businesses to know, because if you don't know where your prospects are searching, then it's going to be kind of hard for them to find you if you're not there. So this comes from a report done by Bright Local, and whether you're brick and mortar, service area provider, professional services, you're going to get something out of this. So let's kind of jump in, and Ian, I'll start with you because Ken Tucker couldn't make it, but I am
playing
joined
hooky.
With Ian Cantle and Jeff Steck. So Ian, what are consumers searching where are consumers searching for local businesses today?
Yeah. So despite all the buzz, despite all of the headlines, Google still dominates. Like, I want that to get across really clear, because even if you read and I suggest people go Google Bright Local's local SEO or local search study 2025, because it's a fantastic read. It really is. The one thing I would just caution people is that it has misleading conclusions or headlines, because that's what's exciting and sexy today, is to say that Google's losing market share. The interesting thing is that when you actually dig into the results, so let me give you from a high level. So Google still dominates. It's got a 45%, one other thing I should mention about this survey is it's a consumer survey, and it's only 1,000 people. And I want to make that clear, because what's interesting is the survey actually breaks it down by age groups. So 4 or 5 different age groups. And once you start to do that, you start to get into a very small cohort, right, of those people. So I even caution people, because I really wish, a university or college would go out and do some studies related to this, because it's so important. And there's got to be some, marketing PhDs that need to do their thesis on something really fascinating other than AI, but AI relates to this. So, so I wanted to make that clear, because I think it is important to understand, what breadth a study is before you start pulling out the details of it. But Google still dominates. It's got, 45% of all consumers said they start with a local search, and they start with Google. And then once you add in Safari, because Safari's default search is through Google, you get up to 53%. And then once you start to drill down, once you include maps and YouTube, you're getting 60 to 80% of all local searches are done on a Google platform. So I think that's really important for people to understand before they're like, I'm jettisoning all my SEO efforts and trying to figure out this AI thing. You have to figure out the AI thing, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Then just to give you an idea too, once you start to drill into local search and the results of this consumer survey, after Google properties, the next biggest used platform for local search is Apple Maps at 4%. So you're talking, like, the disparity is massive. So put your money where people are actually searching for you. But yeah, like, it's saying that, social platforms are starting to grow. More people are looking on social platforms, especially in the younger generations. But I also want to make it clear, in this study, there's kind of 2 parts to the study, and they don't clearly differentiate the 2 parts. One is where they talk about general search, and one is where they talk about local search. So searching for local services, solutions, problems, you name it. And I think that's a really clear or important differentiation people need to understand, because, for instance, if I'm searching for, how to replace this part in my dishwasher, I might search on ChatGPT, or I might search on YouTube for that. But if I'm searching for a dentist near me, I'm starting on Google, right? Or on Google Maps. Because that's where I know that, good reviews are. I can look to see, how they compared to other dentists in the area, or whatever it is that you're searching for. So I think that's really important. But some, I don't know. What do you have to say about that, Jeff? Because you read the study as well.
Yeah, I think, like you said, studies are studies, right? What data did they use? Who did they talk to? What biases did they bring into it? I think you could look at 5 different studies and get 5 different opinions. So I use it as a baseline and as an interesting, there's some validity to it for sure. But then think about it. And what does it mean to me? So I would go to the, different types of businesses are going to see different results, not just the cohorts of the ages and the demographics of people doing the searches, but different businesses even are going to see different, meaningful to them statistics. For instance, emergency plumber near me is going to get a very different type of search result than how do I fix my dishwasher? Right. There's informational searches, there's commercial intent searches, there's transactional searches, somebody's right away going to do something. There's different types of searches. So I think it's important to think through that too, and think through your business. But, the one that didn't really come up, as you alluded to, is the AI search. More and more people are using ChatGPT for their search engine, essentially. And, my wife and I kind of have this thing back and forth. So just ask ChatGPT, or I'm going to go out and I'm going to do my own research. And that's, I think, a personal preference. And it's part of it's recognize the data that it was trained on. But that's one of the key points is, you want to get your data into the AI searches as well, so that you can rank for, the AI overviews or AI search engines. SEO is drastically changing. We've talked about that. Ultimately, it still comes down to what do you have to say and how do you say it, and do people trust it? But you got to think through who's doing the searching, what type of business you are, where you should be. And then also now the second order effects of AI coming into the game. Where's the AI looking? Where's the AI getting its information? ChatGPT was trained on something, Grok is trained on something. Gemini is trained on something. And then, of course, Microsoft, Bing is a tight connection with OpenAI. So you got to start thinking about being in the places, if you're a business trying to get found, being in the places not only that people go to do the searches, but that the engines they're interacting with are also pulling from. So I don't know if I answered your question, but that's just some of the thoughts that came to mind when you were going through.
And those are great thoughts. I just don't want people to miss this, because I hear it so often, Jeff, because we're all caught up in it, right? We're all using ChatGPT for a whole bunch of things. But do I use ChatGPT to find a local service? I might try to research some of them. But the funny thing is that some of the AIs just pull in Google information anyways. But if you're looking at it as a business, how do I as a business get in front of the people that are buying my products? Mm-hmm. You have to be on Google. According to this, 2% of people use ChatGPT for general searches. Yeah. Or actually, sorry, that's local searches. So 2% versus 60 to 80%. I know where I'm putting my money is in the 60 to 80.
Oh, Google absolutely dominates.
Yeah. And Google's not sitting on the sidelines for AI either, right?
No, Gemini is Google, right?
They're the 300-pound gorilla or 600-pound gorilla or 800-pound gorilla that is entirely devoted to not losing their position as the search dominant partner for people, right? So,
and as you pointed out, the headlines tend to be headlines in general. What's the saying in the news world? If it bleeds, it leads. Google's losing money on search. Well, Google's not losing money on search because it's shifting elsewhere, right? And the AI is coming on. They're going to make as much money in AI, I'm sure, as they might lose in traditional search. But yeah, you absolutely have got to be on Google. My point is then there's also the other places that the Google data feeds into, but also the Bing data feeds into, you name it, even your presence on the directories, local directories. I think we may talk about those and anytime we talk about local SEO. But well, yeah,
Google does use AI in their search results.
Of course.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. AI overviews.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I mean, they have for a while, but now they make it blatantly obvious. It's AI overview.
Yeah. Yeah.
And those are good. Like I'm surprised how good some of those are, right?
Yeah. And they do provide links to their, dominant source articles. So now the trick is you're maybe not going to be ranking high on the page because the AI overview is, right? But if you want to appear in the high on the page search results, you got to appear in the AI overview search results because AI overview will give links. So that means you need to maybe gear what you're doing and how you present it and how you answer it to make it more friendly for AI search.
Which isn't new, right? Like if you wanted to rank for voice search or SEO in general, like all the things that you should be doing, over the last 5 years are just as relevant today for showing up in AI. Like there are no different strategies. Yep. If you actually ask the AIs, how do I get my business listed on you? It's SEO strategies, best practices. Like it's a funny, I always find it a funny conversation because I'm like, just follow the best practices. Yes, they're hard.
Yes, they take time.
Yep.
So, Jeff, moving on, I thought this was interesting. Something they pointed out in their study is, and I'll bet a lot of people don't even realize or stop to think about it, but how often are people searching online?
Oh, constantly. Hang on a minute. Let me look that up, or I'll get my phone out here and I'll
look that up on ChatGPT.
Constantly. If you don't believe it, go look in your browser history. Look at how much stuff you've done in a day, how many websites, different pages you've been on. It's staggering. It's mind-boggling. People are constantly doing searches, whether it's on their desktop, asking their phone, interacting with the she who will not be named because I've got one in my office and she'll answer. Constantly, something like 82% of I'm on an earbud, so she won't hear it. So yeah, I think the statistic Bright Local gives is 82% of consumers search daily. And I'm actually surprised. I would think that may be a little higher. That may be not quite higher because, not everyone's in a position where they can search daily, but 82% search something daily, 58% several times a day, 24% at least once daily. It's not sure how those numbers break out, but yeah, I guess the 24% is only once daily is probably what that means. People are constantly searching is the bottom line. We have this vast quest to find answers to things, right? How do we do this? Where do I go for that? How much does that cost? What am I do if, right? It's all, we have questions. We're an inquisitive species. We have questions and, the websites, the online properties have answers. So, you got to be visible. You got to stay visible with updates about what's going on with you and your business so that you stay relevant. And that means doing all the things we've always talked about, blogging, putting out press releases, putting posts on your social media, putting posts on your, news feeds, news articles, press releases, all those kinds of things. And of course, the Google business profile, when you're talking about being found on Google, posting on the Google business profile, it's another form of social media, really. You can put business posts and updates. You got to do all that and then really be thinking about SEO. If not for the traditional SEO, I think it's changing a lot in terms of, meta tags and titles and all the technical stuff. Yeah, it still matters, but I think the importance is diminishing as it's moved toward, the content and the content kind of itself being geared more for question and answer and AI kind of searches. But yeah, you got to be constantly looking at it, staying ahead, thinking about what's coming next and how do I adapt. I guarantee if you're a business owner listening to this, you've gone, I don't need to worry about AI yet. It's still, 5 years off. It's not, it's here now. And you're probably looking at your search traffic going down because of it if you're not adapting. So you got to refresh what you're doing and your tactics constantly to keep ahead of it.
And just a comment about that, like the part about reduction in organic traffic, depending on your website, and what you offer, sometimes that has nothing to do with AI. It has more to do with zero-click responses that Google's giving out, right?
That's also AI though, right?
If somebody, it's shrouded in that. But it's not an AI. I want to make it very clear. It's still Google. It's still a platform, but it's AI trying to give the answer on its platform that still might be you, but it's on its platform. So it's trying to give you the answer, like your phone number, whatever it might be, without actually going to your website. So it's not always a bad thing. It's, could be, but you'd have to dig more.
Yeah, whenever we talk about traffic going down, then the natural next question is, well, what kind of traffic, right? If it's the garbage traffic we don't care about, good, right? It's reducing load in the internet. It's reducing load on our servers, right? We want the good traffic.
And before we move on from this, the one thing I have to pull out of this study, because I hear this so often from my clients, is we got to be on TikTok for the younger generation. And yes, social media wise, you should be there if that's who you're trying to attract, 100%. But from a search standpoint, because people see headlines about TikTok's getting lots of search, that's where my kids search, there's all this anecdotal evidence. Like in this study, they said TikTok searches for local, this is just general searches, this isn't even local, was 3%. So again, where do you put your effort? Like put your effort where the biggest lever is, I say.
Well, going back to the cohorts and your point on the first question, if your demographic is, TikTok users, then it's probably more than 3%. 3% is probably the overall, right? But if your demographic is TikTok users, maybe it's 30% of TikTok users are using it for search. So you gotta really do the strategy work, dig into your ideal client personas. Where do they get their information? How do they use technology? And then adapt accordingly.
Yeah. So there's like Ian said, you really have to understand what they're trying to tell you, and you can't stop at the headline, because they may have this sensational headline in this study, but then they actually do a pretty good job of explaining it. So you have to read it.
Can I just want to answer something, because I have the study up while we're chatting, and
just cheating.
I know it is, but it's because you can't remember every stat. So, but in answer to your like the point you just raised, Jeff, like for Gen Z, which is the predominant one that's using TikTok in this study, only 10% use it for searches. So, like, I think that's important for people to understand, right?
Yeah.
So, Ian, we've seen this a lot. I'm sure you have, Jeff. I'm sure you have as well. There's a lot of businesses, they don't keep their online information up to date. Now, seems to me that's rather important. How important is it, and what kind of issues can that cause for local businesses?
Yeah, I mean, the study found that 85% of consumers said that correct contact info and opening hours are critical to choosing a local business. And they said that's even more important than the price or even than the reviews. So it's just kind of table stakes. Like, you have to have correct contact info. And really the reason is that nobody wants to perform research on, which mechanic should I go to, which store should I go to, and then find that the information that's on their Google business profile or their website or wherever the person's searching is incorrect, because I've had this, especially post-COVID, when there was all sorts of weird hours, like businesses hadn't gone perfectly back to their normal open hours, and you'd go to the grocery store and on Google business profile, it would say, hey, they're open till 12. You'd get there at night, at 11 and it closed at 8, and you're like, what? So like stuff like that really upsets people. And that's just, one simple example. So,
I think it's a basic trust and credibility factor.
It's a good,
right? If I'm looking for someone and their hours are wrong, they can't even be bothered to keep their hours correct, and they just wasted my time. Why do I think they're going to do a good job at whatever they're trying to do?
Yeah. Oil change, fix my teeth, whatever it is, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a good point.
Yeah. And the opening hours is huge, because it's like you said, Ian, if someone shows up and you're closed because your hours weren't correct, or maybe you failed to mention that you weren't open on Mondays, and someone shows up and it pisses people off.
Yeah. And, as a business, it behooves you to ensure that your contact and open hour information is correct on your website, because imagine if your information on the web is showing that you open an hour earlier, you've just chopped off a percentage of your business, because maybe people can't come that late. They wanted to come earlier, and so they went to one of your competitors, right? So it's not just we're talking about public perception at this point and how it affects your business, but also it could just be pure, like you're shutting off the spigot when you could be getting customers.
Yes, definitely. So this was a question I was going to ask Ken, so maybe I'll start. Maybe we can all throw in on it. Customer reviews, how critical are they? Well, they're extremely important. I think they said in the study 67% of consumers almost always check business reviews. And I know I do too, because I don't know anything about this business, really. I mean, unless I've dealt with them before. If I'm looking for somebody to put new gutters on my house, I'm going to kind of depend on reviews, because I have never had to replace the gutters on my house, at least not yet. So I don't know any. Well, I probably do, but still, I'm going to check reviews. And responding to reviews is important. Ian, Jeff, you have anything to add into that?
I'll start, and Jeff, if you want to pick up. So the reviews are so important, right? Because we as businesses can talk about how great we are as businesses. We can make promises about what we deliver, but when a customer of ours, a client, a patient leaves a review, and it's a legitimate review, and again, I do want to help people understand too that the quality of reviews has risen dramatically over the last couple of years, because platforms have put enormous amounts of energy into keeping good reviews, trying to get rid of fake reviews, right? Because they know that, to Jeff's point, this is all about trust. And so when a client or a customer will share their experience with someone else and they'll talk about you in a glowing way, we as consumers that are looking for a solution, we put a lot of trust in that. A lot of us have become, all the studies show that we're kind of a research first before we make decision kind of consumer now in North America and around the world. And so, we're all researchers. We all want to do our research so that we can find the best solution. We look at positive reviews. We look at overall aggregate review rating. We look at negative reviews to see how the businesses respond to them and whether there's, the recency. Because I know I've certainly seen this where, sometimes you'll sort it by most recent, and you'll see this flurry of bad reviews, and you're like, oh man, like, did they sell the business? Do they have a new manager? Is what's going on? And so they help tremendously for sure.
I was just trying to look it up, and I don't know if we'll get the numbers right because I couldn't find it quickly. But I'll use an example, personal example. So a couple of years ago, the water heater in our house went out. We needed a new water heater. So we checked with some of the Facebook groups, neighborhood Facebook groups, and called somebody out to do an estimate. And I got the estimate, and I have a background in home services, so I kind of looked at it. It just seemed really off, seemed really high. And they played the, let me go out in the truck and call the manager. Maybe I can get you a better deal trick, and came back in. Oh yeah, he was in a really good mood and we can get you 10% off. I just like, yeah, no, thanks. Go away. Had somebody else come out and they quoted half. So I went on and I posted a 1-star review of the first company, and I put a screenshot. I redacted my name and address, but I put a screenshot of the estimate and said, these guys are trying to rip me off. Here's what happened. That got 3 thumbs up as a review, right? And this is a number I couldn't find quickly. I think it had been shared something like 100 times. So that one review, that negative review with factual information about how this company is trying to rip me off, how much business did that cost them, right? The flip side, how many people were saved a lot of heartache, but reviews are incredibly important, and keeping up with the reviews, keeping good, steady review growth. Don't go out and say, oh, I think I'll get 500 of them next week, because that looks fishy. Good, steady review growth, and then responding to all the reviews and commenting on them genuinely, authentically. If it's a negative, not argumentatively, is super, super critical, super important for local businesses.
Yeah, review velocity is important. Yep. And recent reviews are important, because if you go look at reviews for a business and the most recent review is 2 years ago, you're kind of like, what's wrong with them? So all those things are important. Put your reviews on your website.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So Jeff, we talked about Google and how important they are and how they dominate, but there are other platforms out there. So what platforms should small businesses optimize for besides Google?
Yeah. So again, go back to strategy first. For your target market, what's important to them? Figure out where they are and pay attention to that. And that extends to social media. You can have all your contact information and business information on social media. So if your demographic is one that uses Facebook, be on Facebook, have a Facebook page. If we talked about TikTok a few minutes ago, so have the presence in the right places and then work it effectively. Social media is still maybe 14%, I think is what Bright Local said. The map apps, of course, if you're a restaurant, if you're a store, someplace that people are traveling to get to, super important to be on the map apps, especially restaurant. You're out driving around, running errands, and, with your significant other, and you go, gee, I'm getting hungry. Where should we eat? And you go, I don't know. You pick up the phone and go, what's a, Italian restaurant near me, right? You've got to be on the map apps to be found with those. But then, as we talked about earlier, Bing, don't ignore Bing and the Bing Places. That's the Microsoft equivalent to Google. And in fact, I think you can synchronize from your Google business profile into Bing Places now. So there's really no reason not to do it. There's a very small percentage. We've talked about that before. I think Paul took me to task because I had it at a higher percentage than it really is. But there is a small percentage of people that do use Bing. So especially if all you have to do is push a button to synchronize your Google profile over to Bing, why wouldn't you do it if some people are using Bing? And then the directory listing that we love to hate, Yelp, beyond Yelp, because it does show up. It carries a lot of weight in search still. A lot of businesses will have their own specific, industry type specific listings. House, a very good one for remodelers and home services businesses. So you want to be in all the places you can to grab a profile that makes sense to help show up in search, that you can get links back to your website, that you can put out examples of what you're working on. You can get reviews. Just leverage them all. Of course, don't ignore the big ones. But maybe work in occasionally a few of the smaller ones and keep building that overall body of work and that overall presence. And then make sure you cross-link everything back and forth. All of your profiles and directory listings and social media all need to link to your website. And your website should mention at least the strategic. You don't need to mention every business directory you're in, but at least mention the key ones. House, if you're in the home services world, you probably do want to link to your house page, your Facebook page, your Twitter account, your Instagram. If you're servicing Gen Z, then to your TikTok. So make it easy for people to find things no matter where they are, and then get someplace else and see more. That's what you really want to do, right? Is get their attention and then draw them in deeper and deeper. Yeah,
and Yelp is kind of unique because there's certain parts of the country where Yelp is huge.
Yeah,
and you have to be there. Yeah, certain industries in certain parts of the country. And there's certain parts of the country where Yelp is just, I'm not going to say they're non-existent, but people just don't use Yelp in certain parts of the country. So you should still be there, but don't spend a lot of resources if people aren't using Yelp where you are.
And make sure you do it the right way. Yelp is very protective about verifying what's put up. You can't give somebody a link that'll take them to link to write a review, because Yelp will see it came in from a link and they'll go, oh yeah, you're just, it's not authentic. It's not genuine. You got to know the ins and outs of the platforms and how to work them. But unfortunately, you can't ignore it. I'm not a fan of Yelp, but it is important for a lot of businesses and some of my clients to be on. So we're on it.
And I would never suggest people ignore platforms, but I just want to be 100% clear with people. Put your energy where you'll get the best return on investment. And so if the statistics are saying 60+% of searches are being done on Google platforms, put 60% of your effort there. And then if TikTok, it's saying gets 3%, put 3% of your effort there, unless, as Jeff was saying, it is Gen Z you're after, then put 10%, because according to the stats in this study, only 10% of searches by Gen Zs are done there. Don't get caught up in the shiny object syndrome of other platforms. And according to this, Yelp gets 3% of searches. So again, put your efforts where you'll get the biggest bang for your buck.
Yeah, Yelp does show up a lot in searches, which is the complicating factor. But the other thought you triggered, Ian, when you said that, is don't ignore anything. And here's another reason why. Just because you aren't doing anything on it doesn't mean you're not on it. Right. A lot of the especially the so-called citation directories, they mine public information and they create a listing for you. And it's probably not correct information. It may be an old address. It may be an old phone number. You need to go in and look at them. And this is where tools like BrightLocal or Yext really excel. You need to go in and look at them and make sure they have the correct information, even if you're not working them actively as a review site or, someplace that you expect to get a lot of business from. It's so easy to keep the profiles up to date that even if it means you get one or two every once in a while, it's worth it. In that overall body of work that's more consistent, having everything listed across the web the same way is only going to help you overall.
So, Ian, we've talked about this a little bit. Maybe we can go into it a little bit deeper, but are younger generations using search platforms differently?
Yeah, I think the statistics, at least according to this study and every other statistic I've heard to date, suggests that for sure. But it's not as fall off the cliff as many headlines want us to believe. So even in this study, for local searches by Gen Z, I don't know, are you guys Zers or Zetters? So,
Z all the way.
Z. Okay, we'll go with Z. So even in this study, it's showing that Gen Z local searches, which platforms they use, Google is 30%, Google Maps is 18%, TikTok is 10%, Safari is 6%, which uses Google, and then Facebook is 5%, right? So if you look at the social side of that, again, where do you put your effort, right? I put my effort where I'm going to get the biggest bang for my buck. And if Gen Z is who I'm after, I would still put it in Google. I wouldn't ignore the others, right? TikTok might be my secondary platform I put effort into, but would I put 100% effort into TikTok and ignore Google? That doesn't make any sense.
And recognize, again, it is generational too with, your target audience. And then YouTube, we haven't talked about YouTube a lot, other I think at the top you mentioned as a Google property. It is a very viable search engine. A lot of people will use YouTube for search. And again, it's demographic. My kids are, without giving away too much, they're 3.5 years apart. And the older, not anymore because it's kind of dying off. It's just the old folks platform now. But the older of the two would have been on Facebook, while the younger of the two was all over YouTube. And that's just 3.5 years difference. So your demographics of who you're going after and where they get their information, how they get their information, can't stress enough the importance of really understanding that and having those ideal client personas defined, and then keeping up with the fact that it's shifting, right? Gen Z are in the workforce now. So if you 10 years ago said, oh, Gen Z, they're all, well, TikTok didn't really exist 10 years ago, but they're all Instagram, they're all whatever, I don't want to be there. They're not my target market. Well, guess what? Now they are, right? And if they grew up with that platform and they're still using it, then you need to shift. You need to get some presence on those platforms. So it's don't get stuck in a rut and keep up with your target market and be everywhere they are.
Yeah, and we've talked about that before, that your target audience is going to get younger. That's just how it works. People get older.
That means they're going to use different platforms.
Younger customers. So,
yeah.
And you had mentioned YouTube, and it's really important to be on YouTube because people may not start a search on YouTube with transactional intent, but it can lead to that because like the how-to videos are still the most searched videos. Well, if you're there and they need your service or your product, guess who they're probably going to call? So
there's a great example of that in the HVAC world where it's proven to be where the guys or ladies, but it tends to be guys in that world, do videos on how to adjust your thermostat. And they do it for all sorts of different thermostats, right? Nest thermostats and whatever, Carrier ones. And so those show up in searches. And then when people need help, you've almost created a relationship already because they've seen how helpful you can be with something as simple as changing your thermostat or making setting changes or whatever it is, or replacing your filter, right? Like people value that kind of information. They see how you interact on camera, and you've already reduced barriers.
Yeah. And if you think about how the algorithms work too, they're going to reward overall presence. So if you start to get a lot of views based on informational stuff, you're not going to sell, a how-to guide to adjust your thermostat. But if you get a lot of traffic to your YouTube channel or maybe to your website, if it's an article on your website, that traffic is going to count in the ranking factors. It's a small contribution, but it's going to count in the ranking factors of the engagement and the overall value of your website. So, again, lots of moving parts. They all work together.
One of the interesting stats, again, when you lump it together, is what platform or what types of platforms are consumers using for local searches, and they drill down into the generations, and it's a very helpful chart. What I find interesting is when you look at everybody from millennials to boomers, all of those stats of search engine plus maps equals around 80 something % on Google. Like, so search engine and maps are usually Google to start with, like Google owns a large percentage of that. So, you can basically say Google. And then even when you go to Gen Z, you're still looking at 65%. Right. So it is a drop tremendously from the other generations, but it's still 65%. Like, it's pretty wild data.
So this is something else we've talked about in the past, and we could probably roundtable this a little bit. Customers make decisions fast because they do their research. So that process may take a while, and they check reviews and things like that, do their research. But once they decide that they're going to contact a business, they pretty much made their decision. And to me, this is more about speed of response for the business than how fast consumers are actually making decisions. But according to the study, almost 50% said they plan if it's a business they're going to, they plan their route immediately after searching. So that goes to high buyer intent. But if they call your business and they get a voicemail, they're probably going to move on. It's why we've talked about voice AI, because it can replace an answering service. And by the time a consumer calls a business, they're probably ready to buy, and you better have a solution in place other than leave a message, because even with voice AI, you can collect their contact information, immediately send them a text or email to someone and, someone in the business, and they can get back to them within minutes. So any other thoughts on that from anyone?
Yeah, I think, you mentioned the intent word, right? And that's the key. There's different types of searches, different types of use of platforms have different intents. But absolutely, if you're in one of those categories, if you're a restaurant, people are driving around, like I said earlier, Italian restaurants near me, next thing I'm going to do is go, oh, well, that one looks good. And I'm going to hit the get directions button. If I'm looking for a store, if I'm looking to buy something, if I'm trying to get some information, I want to call. Yeah, all that you got to get back right away. But before that, you got to show up, right? So showing up in those searches means you got to have all the information in your profiles and everything clearly defined. If you're a service area business, define the service area that you're in so that near me makes sense. Define the services that you offer, not just one or two, but take advantage of as many different services as you can. If you go look at the Google Business Profile, important tip, pay attention to that, because sometimes Google will start adding them in for you, and they may not always be the ones you want. But take a look at all of the ones that are in there or could be in there, and think of all the variations that you can add to that. It's not just dentist near me. It might be orthodontist. It might be teeth whitening. It might be cavity filling. You got to figure out cleaning. You have to figure everything that goes along with it and build those specific services out in your profile so that you have the best chances of aligning for those type of searches. And then, there's other stuff on the profiles too, that the price of entry, I think you called it earlier, right? Having the hours, having the address, having the phone numbers, that's all important.
There's a really neat section to this study where it talks about how do consumers approach business selection within their research. And it's so fascinating to look at it because, a lot of marketing is kind of social, economic, trying to figure out who is my ideal client and how do I get into their head, right? To understand who they are, how they buy. And what was really interesting in this section was it was talking about how it kind of lumped it into three areas. One was how do they choose one, or they choose one business to focus more research on. And you could see like the boomers do 24% of that. The Xers do 27%. The millennials do 35%. The Zers do 38%. So it was so interesting how like each generation does more and more research in order to choose the business they do more research on, right? And then the next section, it was talking about they choose one business and make a decision, and everybody was almost equal in that, except for the boomers were a little less. And then it went down to they choose several businesses and conduct more research. So they want kind of a menu of businesses to then reach out to or conduct more research on. And this was the reverse of that first one, where the Zers do the least amount and the boomers do the most amount. So it was so interesting just to see, how each generation is interacting with businesses online in different ways, but there's, kind of an equal opportunity to reach them. You just have to know how to do it.
Yeah, that goes back to, again, doing the research and understanding your demographics. Paul?
Yeah, I found that interesting too, Ian, that the younger generation kind of does the least amount of research, what you just said there, and the boomers do more. But
yeah, it's like the Gen Zs just want one. They want the short list super fast. They just
exactly.
Yeah,
we could get probably not qualified to talk sociographics and all that, but in general, I think the attitude is that the younger generations are more ADHD. They want to lock in on something. They don't want to. That's actually just the opposite. They have more anxiety, more fear of missing out, more concerns about doing the right thing. So they go deep on something. I guess that's counter to the ADHD now that I'm saying that out loud. But I've seen it. I've seen it in my kids. They don't. I guess the ADHD part comes in. They don't want to be. That's too much. It's overload. I've got all these things pulling me in different directions. I need to just lock in on something. That's their coping mechanism with it, I think is the way I would put it, as a parent and having seen it. And then that tends to manifest itself into wanting to make sure that that's the right thing and then going deeper on it. That's my guess, but not really qualified.
Well, you're observationally qualified.
Well, I'm, qualified as a parent. But.
That's right. And as a marketer.
Well, we are kind of coming up on an hour, and I think these last two questions I had, we've kind of talked about them. Does anyone want to? One of them is, are consumers using multiple platforms for search? Well, they are.
Yeah, we hit that a lot. Yeah, absolutely. And be on the right ones.
And the next one is AI like ChatGPT or in overviews, we've talked about this a little bit. Are they reshaping how people search? Probably
Absolutely.
not. They
I would
are.
say, I think absolutely.
Yeah, it is, but I'd say not as much as people might think they are. I don't usually search on ChatGPT simply because I'm in front of a computer all day,
Yeah,
every day, and I always have Google open. I don't always have ChatGPT open.
That's the counter
So
I
it's
gave.
just easier to type in a search.
That's the counter I gave earlier about, my wife always gives me a hard time. My wife works with me in the business. We're partners in business and in life. And she gives me a hard time. So just use ChatGPT, just because I'll go out and I'll be doing my own Google searches, my own queries, and I'll be going to the website and I'll be looking in the help document. She's just ask ChatGPT. So I think that falls into the category of it's absolutely coming on and more people are using it. And don't ignore it, I think is what it falls into. Don't make assumptions about, well, that's not the way I do it, so nobody else does it.
Yeah, don't ignore it. And it's just, I know you can't ignore it, but if I'm not logged into ChatGPT and I have my browser open, I'm just going to do a Google search.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, Paul. My wife, though, total opposite. She's like, just go to ChatGPT. That's her go-to now for getting any question answered.
But then I have to log in. I already have my browser open.
Again, like the intent differentiation you brought up earlier, Jeff, I always see there being a pretty big divergence of where you search based on your intent. And I don't see like ChatGPT or any of the other wholly like separate AI platforms. Like Gemini's built into Google, right? So you're going to see it anyways. But I don't see people using that for local searches for, like, I want a Thai restaurant, near me, right? And that's
you might.
The general searches for sure.
I do a lot of research on ChatGPT.
Somebody's telling me just the other day that they were asking for a comparison of two restaurants.
For sure.
So
yeah. And I've used it to try to find like a used car of a particular kind in a particular price range in a particular area and all sorts of things like that. But very, very different kind of searches, at least. And the study itself is saying that only 40% of consumers are actually actively even using AI platforms right now for any kind of searches. So even that statistic, like, that's not even talking about local search, that's just talking about general search. Is it on the rise? Absolutely. Should we ignore it? Absolutely not. But for businesses, go where the people are searching, and that's not AI right now.
Try Perplexity for search if you want to see what AI search should be. It's really good. And I actually, not to get too meta, but I was talking to another guy who was got an AI startup the other day, and we were talking about marketing platforms. And I won't give away any names of his company or any of the other ones, but we were talking about AI-based marketing platforms. And he had one I hadn't heard of, and I had one he hadn't heard of, and he put it into Perplexity and asked it to compare the two. So the AI was comparing the AIs.
Yeah. I like asking the AIs what they think about themselves in particular areas too. Like, where do you get your data from? Like, where, what are you basing your answer on? It's interesting. You'll get some interesting responses.
Yeah.
And then it'll start hallucinating.
Yeah, I was going to say, be careful. Catch them in lies. If you ask them enough times to where did you get that from, then finally they'll go, I made it up. I actually literally had an AI do that to me once.
Well, and it's a good practice to ask it for, like, when you're asking it a question, ask it to provide the source as well.
Yeah.
And then actually click on the source, because I've had it where it gives you multiple sources and you click on the source and it takes you nowhere. And I'm like, okay, that's not helpful. I'm not, maybe it had a legitimate source, but the link it provided wasn't.
But given that AI is here and it's coming on stronger and stronger every day, do the things you need to do now. Don't say, I don't need to worry about it for 5 years. You needed to worry about it last year, and do the things now to, make all your marketing assets work for you in the AI realm too.
But just remember, if you do those things, they're the same things you need to do for Google SEO.
Yeah, exactly. Well, with a slight distinction of it may shift like the language you use, how you gear things for questions. Do you use schema markup more, make it more
the same as voice search. Same as voice search, though.
Yeah.
Exactly the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which has been around for years.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. If you found anything that was helpful, share it. If you have any topics you want us to cover, let us know. Ian, you want to take us out?
Sure. Thanks for being with us today. Thank you for Jeff and Paul and Ian. Thank you, Ian, for being here as well. And thank you, Ken, for listening to us while you're driving. And if you have a particular question, please send it our way. We want to be answering the things that you're most interested in and bringing our experience and insights to light for that. So again, thanks for being with us. Share with your friends, family, colleagues, and don't forget to keep calm and mark it on, folks.